The rain had already started by the time the lobby doors swung open and let in the cold. Michael Anderson stood at the Moorfield Inn's front desk with a rolling suitcase and a reservation printout folded into thirds inside her coat pocket. The lobby smelled of wood polish and someone's dinner from the back kitchen, a faint trace of rosemary and something braised. The lights overhead were warm and amber-tinted, the kind of lighting that flatters a room and makes it feel more expensive than it is. She noticed the lighting the way she noticed most things, briefly and without attachment, and then looked at the woman behind the desk. The woman's name tag read Delia. She had a kind face and slightly damp hair at the temples, and she was looking at Michael with the careful attentiveness of someone who had been on their feet since early afternoon and was choosing to stay pleasant about it. "Anderson," Michael said. "I have a reservation. Single room, 2 nights," Delia typed. The lobby's small speaker played something instrumental and low. Outside, the rain was beginning to produce a sound against the glass that was less rainfall and more percussion. "I have you in room 12, Delia said. "That's one of our standard rooms, East Corridor." She paused, looking at the screen the way people look when they are deciding whether to say the next thing. "We do have availability in the Merton suite right now if you'd like to move up. It has a separate sitting room and a view of the garden. Same availability for your dates, and the rate is only 70 more a night." Michael smiled at Delia the way she smiled at waiters, who asked if she had saved room for dessert. Appreciative and complete. "Room 12 is fine, thank you." Delia nodded, produced a key card and began explaining the breakfast hours with a genuine warmth that suggested she had said the same words several hundred times and had found a way to mean them each time. Michael listened, asked about the parking situation, and received her key card with both hands in the small, instinctive gesture her mother had modelled for 40 years. She did not notice the woman watching from the corridor entrance until she was turning toward the elevator. The woman was perhaps 50, with sharp professional posture and a blazer the colour of old pewter. She had a clipboard tucked under one arm. She was looking at Michael the way a sommelier looks at a customer who has just ordered the house wine, not with contempt exactly, but with a brief recalibration of what kind of attention the situation required. Her name tag, when Michael saw it the following morning in better light, would read Renata Holloway, manager. That night she simply turned back toward the corridor and disappeared, and Michael wheeled her suitcase toward the elevator without giving her a second thought. Room 12 was on the east corridor's far end, past a linen closet and a storage room whose door was slightly ajar and smelled of cleaning supplies. The room was not large. It held a bed with a grey-blue coverlet, a pine desk with a single lamp, a window that faced the inn's back courtyard, and a bathroom with a rain shower head that was considerably more pleasant than the room's category suggested. Michael hung her coat on the back of the door, set her suitcase on the luggage rack, and opened the window an inch to let in the cool air. Outside, the courtyard was being rained on. There was a stone path between 2 garden beds, a wooden bench damp and dark with weather, and at the far edge of the yard a large rain gutter along the roofline had begun to overflow at its elbow joint. The water was coming down in a rope rather than a trickle, pooling on the stone below. She noted it the way she noted the lighting in the lobby, briefly and without attachment, and then pulled the window mostly closed and sat down on the edge of the bed. The drive had taken 3.5 hours. She had stopped once for gas and once to cry in a parking lot outside Decatur, which she was not particularly surprised by. Her mother had been gone 5 weeks. The estate would take at least another 2 visits and a great deal of paperwork, and she had learned in the first week of this process that grief had its own schedule and did not ask permission. The estate attorney's office was 11 minutes from the inn. She had looked it up twice. She ate a granola bar from her bag, read 7 pages of a novel without retaining them, and turned off the lamp at 10 past 10. She was asleep before the rain stopped. The Moorfield Inn's common room opened at 7 in the morning for breakfast and remained available through the afternoon for guests who wanted somewhere to sit that was not their room. It was a pleasant space, long and low-ceilinged, with a stone fireplace at one end and a series of wide windows along the south wall that looked out over the same courtyard Michael's room faced. There was a sideboard with coffee urns, a rack of local maps and walking guides, and a small shelf of paperback novels in various states of structural collapse. Michael came down at 7:45, poured herself coffee from the urn, and sat at the table nearest the courtyard windows, because the light there was good, and because she had the attorney meeting at 10 and wanted to go through the document folder she had brought before she went. The common room had 2 other guests at that hour, a couple who were studying a laminated map with the focused optimism of people planning a walking day, and a man at the table by the fireplace who was doing something with his hands that she could not immediately identify. He had a thermos next to him, the plain insulated kind, and a coil of rubber weather stripping on the table, and he was running his thumb along a section of it the way a person runs their thumb along a seam to check whether it will hold. He was perhaps 40, maybe a year or 2 past it, with the kind of build that comes from physical work rather than from deliberate effort about physical work. His jacket was a dark olive canvas, worn at the collar, and he had a smear of something grey on the back of his left hand that might have been cork. He did not look up. Michael did not particularly look at him. She opened her document folder and began reading the summary her attorney had sent. Her mother had owned a house with a half-acre lot and a savings account that was smaller than Michael had expected, and a set of opinions about where her things should go that were larger than anyone had anticipated. There was a neighbour dispute about a garden fence that had been ongoing for 6 years and had apparently achieved a kind of immortality. The attorney's note at the bottom of the last page read, "Manageable with patience." Michael wrote the word "patience" in the margin, with a period after it, and moved on. She was on her 2nd cup of coffee when the man by the fireplace stood, picked up the weather stripping, and walked toward the door that opened onto the courtyard. At 8:11, Michael heard the rain begin again. The attorney meeting was thorough and not brief. She sat in a chair across from a man named Gareth for 2 hours and 17 minutes, and when she left, she felt the way she always felt after that kind of meeting, like something had been resolved that she had not been ready to resolve. She stopped at a bakery 2 doors down and ate a pastry over the sink because she had forgotten to eat breakfast properly, and her body was reminding her about this in a pointed way. She was back at the inn by noon. The rain had lightened to a mist. The courtyard gate was open, and as she passed the window of the common room, she saw the man from that morning, the one with the canvas jacket, working at the gutter elbow along the far roofline with a section of new drainage pipe and a tube of weatherproof sealant. He was standing in what remained of the puddle from the night before, which had not fully drained from the stone path. She did not plan the next thing. It simply occurred to her the way practical things occurred to her, because the solution was present and the need was obvious. She went up to her room, retrieved the compact travel umbrella from the side pocket of her suitcase, and came back down. She opened the courtyard door and crossed the stone path to where he was working. He heard her coming because the stone carried footsteps, and he turned, one hand still on the pipe. "Yours," she said, and held the umbrella out. He looked at her for a moment. Not a long moment, but a considered one. He had grey-green eyes and the particular stillness of a person who is comfortable waiting before they speak. "I'll get it wet," he said. "It's an umbrella," she said. He took it. He opened it one-handed with the practiced economy of someone who has used one before and does not think it is particularly notable to do so. He went back to the pipe joint without ceremony. "Thank you," he said, and he said it with the weight of someone who meant it in more than the direct sense. She was already turning back toward the door. She registered the weight the way she registered most things and filed it without categorizing it, and went inside. His name was Callum. She did not know that yet. Renata was in the common room the following morning when Michael came down for breakfast. She was standing near the sideboard with a clipboard and a quality of attentiveness that was aimed not at any task in particular but at the room in general, the kind of attentiveness that is actually surveillance. There were 5 guests at breakfast that morning. Michael counted them the way she counted most things, automatically and without purpose. The couple with the map were back. There was a man in a linen jacket who appeared to be in the middle of a phone call he wished were over. There was an older woman in the window chair reading something on a tablet. And there was Michael, who had a cup of coffee and half a bowl of porridge and the morning portion of her document review. Renata approached her table at 8:20. "Ms. Anderson." She said the name with the precision of someone checking a box. "I just want to confirm. Your reservation is for 2 nights. Checkout is tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock?" Michael looked up. "That's right. The confirmation you booked under shows you requested a morning checkout, which is technically before our standard checkout time. I want to clarify that any luggage storage beyond 10 would incur the standard half-day fee, since your room is pre-reserved for the following guest." Michael looked at her. The room was not pre-reserved. She had asked Delia this at check-in specifically because she had not been certain of her departure time. Delia had told her gently and clearly that the room was available through Saturday and that a 10 o'clock checkout was entirely flexible. "I'll be out by 10, Michael said. Renata looked at the porridge bowl. It was a quick look, barely a quarter second, but it landed the way quick looks like that always land. "Wonderful. And I just want to mention our table service for breakfast is reserved for guests in the Merton suite and the 2 garden-facing rooms. For standard rooms, the sideboard is fully stocked. If you've been occupying a seated table, we'll need to ask that you use the high top near the door for future breakfasts." The man in the linen jacket had ended his phone call. He was looking at Renata with an expression of mild surprise. The older woman at the window had not looked up, but her page had not turned. Michael looked at the sideboard, which was 4 feet from any seated table in the room. She looked back at Renata. "I understand," she said. She picked up her coffee cup and her document folder and moved to the high top near the door, which faced a wall and had no window. She set her papers down and continued reading. Renata watched her do this for a moment with the satisfaction of someone who has tidied a room. Then she turned and went back toward the corridor. Michael drank her coffee. She did not think about the table. She thought about the garden fence dispute, which had now spread to include a question about a tree that was on the property boundary and had opinions about drainage. The document folder was 3 inches thick. She had another 2 meetings with Gareth before the estate work was done. She had been in the attorney's office again by 2 o'clock, and she was back at the inn by 4. The mist had cleared and the courtyard was fully lit by a pale afternoon sun that made the stone look almost warm. She was crossing through the lobby on her way to the corridor when she heard Renata's voice from the small office behind the front desk. The door was not fully closed. The gap was perhaps 4 inches, and Renata's voice was pitched the way voices pitch when someone believes they are in a private room. Michael had been reaching into her bag for her keycard. She stopped because she heard her own name. "The Anderson woman. Room 12. Yes." A pause. "No, she's not a problem. She's just one of those budget guests who books the back rooms and then wanders into the common areas like they're part of the general amenity. We had the table situation this morning." Another pause, shorter. "Oh, she's perfectly polite. That type usually is. Comes in with their rolling bag and their printed reservation, and expects the whole inn experience on a room 12 rate. The tips are nothing, the demands are everything once they're settled, and frankly, they make the room tier arrangement hard to maintain with dignity. A pause, a sound like a drawer sliding. She's leaving tomorrow, easy enough. Michael did not move for a moment. The lobby was quiet. Delia was not at the desk. The lobby clock on the wall above the fireplace read 4:17. She stood there with her keycard in her hand, and the cold, specific feeling of having heard something in the exact words it was actually thought, with no softening and no correction. She was not going to cry again in a lobby. She had already used the parking lot in Decatur for that. She put the keycard in her pocket and went to her room. She sat at the pine desk and looked at the courtyard through the window. The afternoon light was doing something complicated with the shadows from the garden beds. The gutter elbow had been fixed. There was no longer a rope of water pooling on the stone. She thought about her mother, who had been a woman who tipped hotel housekeeping staff in cash and left the bills on the pillow with a thank you note every single morning of every hotel stay for as long as Michael could remember. Her mother had been unremarkable about it, in the way that certain deeply held habits are unremarkable to the person who holds them. It had not been a performance, it had been a practice. She thought about Delia, who had been on the desk when Michael arrived wet and tired at 9 in the evening, and who had explained breakfast hours as if they mattered, and who had been behind the desk again the following morning when the breakfast situation happened, trying very hard to be small. She had not seen another desk clerk. She was not certain there was one. She opened the envelope pocket in her document folder and counted the cash she kept there for incidental expenses. She had brought $240 in small bills for the trip, money she usually apportioned over the days for parking, for coffee, for whatever the estate work required in small material ways. She had spent 47 of it. She took out 2 20s. She held them for a moment. She put them back and took out the 20s plus a 5, and then put the 5 back and took out 2 20s again, and that was the number she landed on. $40. She folded the 2 20s together and held them. She put on her coat. Delia was behind the front desk at 4:45, which confirmed what Michael had already suspected, that she had been there since at least the morning shift, and possibly before. She was updating something in the computer system with the focused quiet of someone doing clerical work at the end of a long day. She looked up when Michael approached. "Everything all right with room 12?" she asked, and the question was genuine. "Room 12 is perfect," Michael said. "I wanted to give you this." She set the folded bills on the desk, not tucked into an envelope, not made into something it wasn't, just placed. "I noticed you've been covering the desk both mornings. I wanted to say thank you." Delia looked at the money and then at Michael, with the expression of someone who has been surprised by something they cannot immediately categorize. "That's very kind," she said. "You've been doing 2 people's work," Michael said. "It's $40. I hope it helps." Delia looked at the bills for a moment, with the careful attention of someone who is deciding whether to say the next true thing. Then she said, "It's been a quiet week. I don't mind." "You still covered both shifts." Delia picked up the bills and held them the way Michael had held them, briefly and without making a ceremony of it. "Thank you," she said. "Really." Michael nodded and walked back toward the corridor. She did not look for Renata. She did not check whether anyone had seen. She had her second-to-last meeting with Gareth the following morning at 8:30, which meant leaving the inn before the breakfast room opened and missing the high top by the wall entirely. She ate the second granola bar from her bag in the car and counted this as a small mercy. Gareth had news about the fence dispute that was, as he put it, actually encouraging if you look at the precedent. And Michael looked at the precedent and found it moderately encouraging. The tree on the boundary was going to require a specialist's report. This was not encouraging. She wrote the word specialist in the margin of her folder with the same period she had given patience the day before. She was back at the inn before 11. Her checkout was 10 the following morning. She had one more night. The lobby was quiet when she came through the door. The couple with the map were checking out at the far end of the front desk, and Delia was processing their payment with her usual careful attention. There was a new guest waiting with a rolling bag near the seating area. There was a man sitting in the chair nearest the lobby window, the same chair where Michael had briefly sat the first evening waiting for her keycard, with a newspaper open across one knee. It was Callum. He was wearing the same canvas jacket, cleaned now, or perhaps a different one in the same colour. He had the thermos beside him. He was reading something with the settled attention of a person who has a good deal of practice at waiting in lobbies. He noticed her when she came in, the way he had noticed her approach in the courtyard, with a turning of attention that was quiet and complete. "Your umbrella is in my coat pocket," he said. "I was going to leave it at the desk." She had forgotten entirely about the umbrella. "Keep it," she said. "The gutter elbow is fixed now, but you'll find another thing to stand in the rain over." Something moved in his face that was not quite a smile, but had the same temperature. "Probably," he said. She went to her room. She thought about that exchange on and off for the rest of the morning while she organized the estate documents into the order Gareth would need for the final meeting. She could not have explained what she was thinking about precisely, only that he had said probably with the kind of honesty that suggested it was actually true, and that certain people carry that kind of honesty the way certain people carry good coats, without advertising them. She went down to the common room at noon. He was gone. She ate lunch at the high top near the door, because it was the only surface she felt she was allowed to use without incident. She brought her novel and read it more attentively than she had managed the night of her arrival. The couple with the map had been replaced by two women with hiking boots and excellent wool socks. The phone call man was back in the linen jacket, apparently on a second call of equally ambiguous virtue. Callum came back into the common room at 1:30. He did not sit back at the fireplace table. He sat at the high top, 2 seats down from Michael, and poured something from his thermos into the cup he had apparently been carrying as part of some personal compact with self-sufficiency. She looked at him. He looked at the courtyard window. "The drain in the far corner of the courtyard is running slow," he said. "Going to back up if we get more rain tonight." "Are you responsible for all the drains?" she asked. "Someone has to look at them," he said. She thought about asking more and decided it was not necessary. He seemed comfortable with the question not going further. She went back to her novel. He looked out at the courtyard and drank whatever was in the thermos cup. After a while he said, without preamble, "Are you here for work?" She considered this. "Something like that," she said. "My mother passed. I'm here for the estate." He was quiet for a moment, not the quiet of not knowing what to say, but the quiet of someone who understood that the sentence she had just spoken had weight, and that the appropriate response to weight was not to immediately offer something lighter. "I'm sorry," he said, and he said it plainly, without the performance of sympathy which made it land the way plain things land. "Thank you," she said. The novel was still open, but she was not reading it. "How much longer?" he asked. "One more meeting, tomorrow morning." She paused. "Then I think I'm done with this part of it." He nodded. He looked back at the courtyard. "There's a decent bakery," he said, "on Aldrich Street, if you need somewhere quiet to sit after." She had already found the bakery by accident. She had eaten a pastry over its sink. She did not say this. "Thank you," she said. The afternoon light was coming through the courtyard window at an angle that caught the stone of the garden path and made it look almost like something you would photograph. She thought about her mother, who had loved hotels and had loved stone paths, and had tipped housekeeping every morning of every stay. She read 4 more pages of her novel. They stayed at the high top until the light shifted. The following morning was clear. The overnight rain had not materialized, which meant the slow drain in the courtyard corner had been spared for now. Michael was up at 7, dressed and mostly packed, her suitcase standing by the door with her coat draped over it. She had 40 minutes before she needed to leave for Gareth's office. She came down at 7:20 to get coffee from the sideboard and possibly eat something that was not from a foil wrapper. The common room was quiet. Delia was behind the desk in the lobby. A thin bar of sunlight was coming through the garden window and lying across the floor in a way that made the room feel briefly generous. She was standing at the sideboard with a coffee cup when the lobby door opened and admitted a man she had not seen before. He was perhaps 45, compact and deliberate in his movements, wearing a good dark coat and carrying a leather satchel. He crossed to the front desk without pausing and said something to Delia that Michael could not hear from the common room doorway. Delia glanced up, glanced toward the corridor that led to the maintenance storage and the courtyard, and then picked up the house phone. Renata appeared from her office within 30 seconds, which gave Michael some information about how closely Renata monitored that phone. The man in the dark coat set his satchel on the front desk and opened it and removed a document that he laid flat on the counter, with the care of someone handling paperwork that has already been reviewed by several people above his pay grade. He said something to Renata. She looked at the document and then at him with the expression of a person who has just been handed information that is rearranging something interior and is trying to do the rearranging quietly. Callum walked in from the corridor door. He was wearing the canvas jacket again. He had the thermos. He stopped just inside the corridor doorway when he saw the man at the desk, and something passed over his face that Michael read as recognition and, beneath it, a mild and resigned awareness that the thing he had apparently been waiting to happen had now happened. The man in the dark coat looked up. "Mr. Voss," he said, and the name came out with the clean precision of someone who uses titles and surnames professionally and means them. "I have the transfer documents for the Caldwell property finalized. The Moorfield Review summary is in the second section, along with the occupancy and maintenance reports for all 4 properties." Renata's hand, which had been resting on the edge of the front desk, became very still. Delia looked at the desk surface. The lobby was quiet in the way lobbies get quiet when the number of people in them has not changed, but the weight of what is being said has shifted everything. Michael stood in the common room doorway with her coffee cup. She was looking at Callum. He was looking at the man in the dark coat in the way people look at a situation they chose not to prevent, because prevention would have required a different kind of life than the one they had decided to live. The man in the dark coat had not noticed Michael. He continued. "The occupancy rates across the 3 satellite properties are strong. The Moorfield itself is running at 82% through the quarter." He paused, turning a page. "I did flag the guest relations summary from this property in particular. There are some service tier discrepancies I wanted to bring to your attention, but we can walk through those separately." Renata made a sound. It was not quite a word. It was the beginning of an attempt at a sentence that had not yet located its subject. "Mr. Voss," she said, "I wasn't aware you were making a visit to this property personally." "I try to visit without announcement," Callum said. "It's easier to see how things actually run." He said it without particular emphasis. He did not look at Renata when he said it. He was looking at the document the man in the dark coat, whose name Michael still did not know, had laid on the front desk. Renata looked at the document. She looked at Callum. She looked at the document again with the expression of someone realizing that the terrain they have been navigating has a different set of topographic features than the map they were using suggested. "The guest relations summary," Callum said. "What does it flag?" The man in the dark coat said, "Primarily the room tier restriction on common area access. It was applied this week in a way that may not be consistent with the brand standard." Renata said, "I can explain the context behind that." She said it with the certainty of a woman who has always been in charge of context. The certainty did not quite reach her eyes. "I'm sure you can," Callum said. He turned then and looked at Michael in the common room doorway. She looked back at him. She had the coffee cup in both hands, the same small, instinctive courtesy her mother had modelled. Her document folder was tucked under her arm. He held her gaze for a moment, and she could see in it the plainness she had read in his face at the high top table. The absence of performance, the quality of someone who has spent enough time watching people perform that they have decided to stop. "The bakery on Aldrich," he said, "after your meeting." It was not a question. It was the same kind of sentence he had used in the courtyard when he said, "probably," honest and without decoration. She looked at him. She looked at the man in the dark coat who was repacking his satchel with the careful efficiency of someone who had delivered his documents, and understood that the rest of the conversation was not his. She looked at Delia, who was studying the desk surface with the concentrated expression of someone finding it very interesting. 10:30, she said. "I should be done by 10:30. Callum nodded. Renata had gone very quiet. She was standing with the clipboard under her arm and her hand flat on the desk, and she was looking at Callum with the recalibrating expression of a woman who is realizing she has been running the wrong equation for days. The clipboard was not providing the structural support it usually provided. Her posture was intact, but only technically. "Ms. Holloway," Callum said, and it was the first time Michael had heard him use someone's formal name, and it had a different quality than his other speech. Not unkind, but entirely without warmth. "I'll look at the maintenance schedule for the property this afternoon, and then I'd like to sit down and go through the guest relations summary. We can do that after lunch." "Of course," Renata said. The two words came out level. The effort behind them was visible. The man in the dark coat, whose name was Shepherd, said goodbye to Delia with the brief courtesy of a person who is leaving a room that is not his to stay in, and went back through the lobby doors. The cold morning air came in for a moment when he opened them, and then the door swung closed, and the lobby was warm again. Michael excused herself to no one in particular, put her coffee cup down on the sideboard, picked up her document folder, and went to collect her coat and suitcase from room 12. She was checked out and in the car before 8:50. Gareth had good news, not uniformly good news, but the kind of news that, when you add it up, tips in the direction of resolution. The fence dispute had an avenue. The tree specialist was already on a list that Gareth maintained with the kind of professional patience Michael was beginning to understand was his primary skill. The savings account, smaller than she had hoped, was at least clean and uncomplicated. He gave her a folder and told her the next steps, and they shook hands, and she walked out into the clear morning air, feeling that something had shifted from undone to in progress, which was not the same as finished, but was considerably better than nothing. She sat in the car for a few minutes before starting it, not crying this time, just sitting with the fact of her mother and the house and the fence and the particular way her mother had set cash on hotel pillows with a careful handwritten note, and the way that practice had never looked like what it was, which was a sustained argument about the value of people who work without being watched. She drove to the bakery on Aldrich Street. It was the same place she had found by accident 3 days earlier and eaten a pastry over the sink. It had 4 small tables and a glass case with things in it that required consideration, and a counterperson who said good morning, as if she meant it. Michael ordered coffee and a slice of something with apples in it, and sat at the table nearest the window. Callum arrived at 22 minutes past 10, which meant he had come from the Moorfield and found parking without drama. He was still wearing the canvas jacket. He no longer had the thermos. He ordered coffee at the counter and sat across from her without the small performance of settling that some people produce when they are sitting down with purpose. "How was the meeting?" he asked. "In progress," she said, "which is better than it was." He nodded. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup and looked at it, and she registered again that quality she had noticed in the courtyard, the stillness of someone who is comfortable letting a silence be a silence. "You own the inn," she said. It was not a question. She had understood it from the lobby, in the same clean, immediate way she understood most practical things. "4 properties," he said. "The Moorfield is the oldest. I started there." "You were fixing the gutter." "The maintenance crew is good," he said. "Some things I look at personally." He said it the same way he'd said "probably" and "someone has to look at them," with the levelness of a person describing what they actually do, rather than what they want you to think of them for doing. She considered this for a moment. Outside the window, Aldrich Street was going about its morning with the unhurried quality of a small town that has decided it is in no particular hurry. "Renata," Michael said. Not a question either. He was quiet for a moment. "I saw the breakfast situation," he said. "Not from the room, from the courtyard window. I was looking at the drain." She thought about that. The courtyard window, at the angle of the garden-facing rooms, would have had a clear line to the common room and the high top near the door. She did not find this comforting or uncomfortable. She found it simply accurate. "She thought you were a budget guest who expected premium treatment," he said. "She was right that I was a budget guest," Michael said. "She was wrong about what you expected." He said it flatly, without editorial. "She has a system for reading people, and her system was off. That's a professional problem." A pause. "It'll be addressed." "Not on my account," Michael said. "Not entirely," he said. She drank her coffee. The apple thing was very good. She noted this because some things deserve to be noted. "Delia," she said. He nodded, and she understood from the nod that he knew about the $40, which meant Delia had mentioned it, which meant he had spoken to Delia that morning, and she felt a small thing settle in her chest that had been slightly unsettled since the afternoon she had stood in the lobby with her keycard and heard herself described as a category. "She covered 2 shifts alone," Michael said. "I know," he said. "That's also a staffing problem, also being addressed." She looked at her coffee. She thought about her mother. She thought about the careful annual practice of the hotel pillow and the handwritten note and the way no one ever saw it except the person who did the work and found it. "My mother would have left a note," she said. "I didn't have paper." He was quiet. Then he said, $40 and your name is better than a note." She looked at him. He was looking at the window, at Aldrich Street going about its morning. His profile had the same quality his full face had, settled and unperforming. "You said your name," he said. "Delia told me that. You said, 'I wanted to give you this,' and you put it on the desk, and you told her you noticed she'd covered both shifts. That's different from leaving money." Michael thought about the moment at the desk, which had lasted perhaps 45 seconds and had not felt like anything in particular while it was happening. She had not thought of it as different from leaving money. She had thought of it as putting the money where the person could see it. "Your mother sounds like someone who understood something," he said. "She understood a lot of things," Michael said. "I'm still working out which ones." He nodded as if this were a reasonable answer, and drank his coffee and did not try to improve on it. They sat in the bakery on Aldrich Street for another hour. They talked about the Moorfield and its history, which was longer than she would have guessed, and about the estate work, which was exactly as complicated as it looked, and about the drain in the courtyard corner, which he was going to have the crew address the following week before the autumn rains committed to something. It was not a dramatic conversation. It had the quality of two people in a warm room who have agreed without negotiating it to be honest with each other and have found this to be a considerable relief. When she finally said she needed to start the drive back, he stood when she stood and walked her to the door and held it open without making it into a gesture. On the sidewalk, he said, "Come back when you have the next meeting." She looked at him. The canvas jacket in the clear morning light, the thermos he had not brought, the grey-green eyes that did not ask for anything she had not already said she was willing to offer. "The tree specialist's report takes about 3 weeks," she said. "I'll be here," he said. She drove back the 3.5 hours with the window down an inch and the document folder on the passenger seat. The estate was in progress. The fence had an avenue. Her mother's house was still there on its half-acre lot, waiting for the next set of decisions. She thought about the courtyard at the Moorfield, the gutter elbow fixed, the drain in the corner that would be addressed before the autumn rains, the stone path between the garden beds, damp and dark and warm in the afternoon light. She would be back in 3 weeks. She had left her umbrella with him, a compact travel umbrella, not expensive, slightly damp from the courtyard. He had said he would get it wet, and she had said it was an umbrella, and he had taken it with the care of a man accepting something he understood the cost of. That was the thing she thought about most in the end. Not the lobby revelation, not the documents laid flat on the desk, not Renata standing with her clipboard in a room where her system for reading people had publicly failed. Not even the bakery and the hour of honest conversation. The courtyard, the rope of water from the gutter, the stone path and the cold and the simple mechanical fact that someone was standing in the rain doing a job that needed doing, and she had an umbrella, and she gave it to him. He had known, and she had not, what that meant. She had simply known it was the right thing to do. She thought her mother would have understood. She thought her mother would have done the same, and left a note besides. 3 weeks later, she drove back to the Moorfield. She parked in the same spot, pulled her suitcase from the back of the car, and walked through the lobby doors at just past 4 in the afternoon. The rosemary smell from the back kitchen was there again, and the amber lights, and the instrumental music from the small speaker. Delia was behind the front desk. She looked up, and her face did the thing it does when someone arrives who is actually expected and actually wanted. "Room 12, Delia said. "Room 12, Michael said. The keycard slid across the counter, and she took it with both hands and went down the east corridor toward the window that faced the courtyard, where the stone path was dry and the gutter elbow was quiet, and the garden was doing something unhurried with the last of the afternoon light. She set her bag on the luggage rack and opened the window an inch. Outside in the courtyard, Callum was standing at the far corner with a length of pipe and a measure, looking at the drain, just as she had known he would be. He heard the window. He looked up. He was holding her umbrella, still compact, still slightly damp along the seam. He raised it once in acknowledgement, the same small, deliberate gesture he had used with the weatherproof sealant and the pipe joint, nothing more than what the moment required. She rested her hand on the window frame and felt the cold coming in off the garden. She had brought paper this time.